I believe you also told the journalist who broke your story to spread out the documents you gave them because, quote, if the government thinks you're the single point of failure, they'll kill you. Do you really believe President Obama would have ordered the assassination of journalists as high profile, as well known as Glenn Greenwald, then of The Guardian, and Barton Gellman of the Washington Post? Surely you don't actually believe that.
Certainly not in a way that would not be deniable. But at the same time, we have to look at the history of these cases. The President of the United States has already authorized the extrajudicial killing of a United States citizen far from any battlefield. And when you have that precedent set, and you think about the fact that from the government's perspective, these programs were necessary. They were vital to the national security of the entire nation. And there was one individual somewhere who, by interfering with sort of their ordinary operations, by doing any kind of operation, whether it was stealing their working materials, their journalistic materials, or whether it was indeed interacting with them in a physical nature, which would basically, I'm not going as far as to saying they would be killed. I do think that's a little bit too far. But the bottom line is you have to prepare journalists who have never worked in intelligence, who aren't they don't have a history in the Central Intelligence Agency, how seriously to take the reporting process. And when you say, if you are the single point of failure, if you make some mistake and advertise yourself as the one individual who the government can act against to stop this story, they will do so. I think that's a fair point and an important one to be made.
How about Hillary Clinton, former US Secretary of State? She accused you last year of helping terrorists with your NSA leaks. Now she's being accused of mishandling classified data on her own private email servers. She's even being investigated by the FBI, the Justice Department. How would you describe Hillary Clinton? What would you say to her now?
Now, this is a problem because anyone who has the clearances that the Secretary of State has or the director of any top-level agency has knows how classified information should be handled. And if an ordinary worker at the State Department or the Central Intelligence Agency or anything like that were sending details about the security of embassies, which is alleged to be in her emails, meetings with private government officials, foreign government officials, and the statements that were made to them in confidence over unclassified email systems, they would not only lose their job and lose their clearance, they would very likely face prosecution.
Do you think she potentially endangered U.S. national security by being so careless with her email, from what you know about email and hacking?
It's not my place to say that. What I can say is when the unclassified systems of the United States government, which has a full-time information security staff, regularly get hacked, the idea that someone keeping a private server in the renovated bathroom of a server farm in Colorado is more secure is completely ridiculous.
Last year when I interviewed Jimmy Wales, the founder of Wikipedia, he called you a hero. Daniels called you a hero too. Actor Matt Damon says his new Bourne film is inspired by you. So you're even inspiring action films. Others think you're a traitor. John Kerry, Secretary of State, has called you a traitor and a coward. Donald Trump, who's leading the race for the Republican presidential nomination, he called you a total traitor and said this about you.
This guy's a bad guy. And, you know, there is still a thing called execution.
Execution. Are you worried about what a President Trump might do to you?
No, I'm not. You know, it's very difficult to respond in a serious way to any statement that's made by Donald Trump. But when you've got Donald Trump and John Kerry on one hand, and people like Jimmy Wales who are improving the world, on the other hand, I think it's obvious which side that most people would rather be on. However, it's not about who's right and who's wrong. The arguments about whether I'm a good guy and a bad guy are a complete a red herring.
Say someone contacts you via encrypted email or whatever it is, and they say to you, you know what, I'm seeing horrible things. I want to go forward. I want to do what you did. But I see what you went through. I see what you had to give up. Should I do it or not? What advice would you give them? Do it or not do it?
I think it would be inappropriate to give specific advice, but what I would say is this is what my work at the Freedom of the Press Foundation is about, where we try to create paradigms where people can not only reveal government wrongdoing about serious violations of people's rights on an individual and a massive population-based scale, but that they can also be safe in doing it. We have created new tools, new infrastructures, where people do not have to do and make the same choices that they have in the past, where they realize if they stood up and said something, if they said the government is breaking the law, that they would suffer for it, they can, in the future, maintain their anonymity at the same time that they provide a vital public service in telling us the truth of what's really going on within the government.
Daniel, do you think he's best off where he is, or do you want to see him back in America? Do you think he's actually better off staying where he is?
I don't think he can ever come back to America. I don't think, unless the law changes very significantly, I think the intelligence services will never forgive him for embarrassing them and curtailing their illegal activities. And I think their influence on future presidents is likely to be enough that I don't foresee his being able to come back.
Edward, you're a modest man, and I understand you don't like it being all about you, but people are fascinated by you. I'm fascinated by you. I read an interview where you said you'd seen House of Cards, and I'm thinking, does this guy have a subscription to Netflix? How does he go shopping? Does he use a credit card because you're trying to stay off the grid? You're worried about US intelligence following you. How do you live? How do you shop every day? Do you get to go out? Are you going to be able to go out and watch the next Bourne film with Matt Damon inspired by you? Going to go to the cinema?
Sure. You know, I've met with a number of activists, a number of political figures around the world. I even met with Daniel Ellsberg out here locally. I live a normal life. I ride the subway like anybody else. The idea that people have that, you know, I have to live under a rock is a fundamental misunderstanding, I think, of how the nature of exile has changed. The government may be able to prevent me from physically returning home to the United States and engaging with people in person, but the ultimate result of that, because of advances in technology, means I can't shop at Walmart, but I can still lecture at Princeton.
And you can chat to me here in Washington, D.C. Edward Snowden, Daniel Ellsberg, thanks so much to both of you for joining me on our very first Upfront.